I want to show you a picture from the 1850s. This is a guy named Charles Brondon. And for about 10 years in the 1850s, he walked back and forth over Niagara Falls. 1,100 feet back and forth, 160 feet off of the water. And he got so good at it that he would walk blindfolded on the tightrope. He would walk on stilts. He once went way out there and sat on a chair on one leg, sat on the chair on it. Once, somehow, I don't know how he did it, but he made an omelet out there on the middle of it and ate it. This is him carrying his manager across. And so he became famous, obviously, for this. And one day, the story goes, he took a wheelbarrow, put his manager in the wheelbarrow, and got up on the rope and went all the way across 1,100 feet and then came all the way back. And his manager got out and did the ta-da, and everyone cheered, and it was amazing. And he looks at the crowd and says, "Now, you've seen me do this. You've seen that I can take a person all the way there and all the way back." He says, "Which one of you wants to get in now?" The cheering predictably stopped. "You've seen me do it," he says. "You've seen I can do this." The crowd believed he could do it, but none of them were willing to trust their life in his hands. In Christians, we get caught in this trap with Jesus, with faith. That if we could just see Jesus, if we could watch him do a miracle, if we could hear him audibly, if we could like fist bump Jesus, shake his hand, hug him, whatever version of that is, that would just prove, then I'd believe that if I just had these tangible experiences, my faith would be deepened and I would love him more. It's possible to be like that crowd next to Niagara Falls and admire what Jesus does, but not trust him with our lives. It's possible to come to church and admire Jesus for all of the good things he's done and the miraculous powers and rising. It's possible to admire him and not follow him. It's possible to admire him and be near him and headed into a Christless eternity. That there is something different that Jesus is requiring of us than just to be enamored with his abilities, his power, his message. There's something more. It's possible to want Jesus' power in our lives, but actually under that, to trust something that we're doing, to trust our savings account, trust our wisdom, to trust our power, to trust. Like it's possible to say on one hand, we trust him, but really trusting in something else. So I want to ask the question this morning, what does faith that honors Jesus really look like? Like if it's faith, what James says that faith is the only thing that pleases the Lord, then what kind of faith do we need to have? And what will it cost us to have that faith? We're going to look at a story from John 4. At the end of John 4, that kind of gives us a peek into this answer. And so what I want to do today is I want to look at the context of John 4, where a few weeks ago we talked about the woman at the well with Jesus doing ministry. I want to catch us up to what happened here, because this story happens right after Jesus and woman at the well and his ministry in Samaria. I want to give a little context. I'm going to read the whole story, offer 4 observations of faith, 4 observations of types of faith that we see in this passage, and then I want to ask us one question at the very end, all of us. So just briefly, the context of this passage is John 4 has Jesus going to the woman at the well. And the woman at the well is in Samaria. If you were to draw a map, Judea would be down here. Samaria would be in the middle. The Sea of Galilee would be up here. So usually a Jewish person would travel around Samaria because they hated the Samaritans. They hated them because they believed the Samaritans were half-breeds. They were inbred with Gentile and Jew, and they worshipped on a different hill. And they were like cousins who hated each other, Hatfield and McCoy kind of thing. And so Jesus goes up into Samaria and chats with a woman at the well and tells her all about herself. She runs into the city, which begins 2 days of explosive and effective ministry. And it's unexpected because he's coming from Jerusalem, where the Jewish people are, and he's the Jewish Messiah. And he's received kind of with a, He goes to Samaria, where the expectation is that they would hate him. And over in the narrative, it says, the people of Samaria say, we have heard for ourselves and believed. And so they go there, and Jesus doesn't do any miracles. He's just teaching. We've heard for ourselves who this person is, and we believe. I want to show a map real briefly here of kind of the geography of everything. We're kind of zoomed into the middle of Israel there. Sychar, down at the bottom of that arrow, is the woman at the well, is where we think it happened. So Jesus is going north to Cana, which is about a two-day walk or so. And then our main character in the story, this official, comes from Capernaum, which is up at the top of the Sea of Galilee, and ends up in Cana. And so there is this collection, or this kind of collision between Jesus and the people of Cana and this man from Capernaum. And so we see that the irony that is going to be developed is that in Samaria, this place that would have rejected or should have rejected Jesus, and Jesus should not have ever gone, shows more faith with less evidence than the people of Galilee where he's going to go. That there is an irony being displayed here that is meant to cause us to question what faith really is, what kind of faith can please the Lord. So John 4:46 through 54, follow along in your copies of God's word. Verse 46. So he, Jesus, came again to Cana in Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And at Capernaum there was an official whose son was ill. When this man heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went to him and asked him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. So Jesus said to him, unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. Then the official said, Sir, come down before my child dies. Jesus said to him, Go, your son will live. The man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and went on his way. And as he was going down, his servants met him and told him that his son was recovering. So he asked them the hour when he began to get better, and they said to him, Yesterday at the 7th hour, the fever left him. The father knew that was the hour that Jesus said to him, Your son will live. And he himself believed, and all his household. This was now the second sign that Jesus did when he had come from Judea to Galilee. So quickly, four types of faith that we're going to see here. We're going to see a desperate faith, a tested faith, an imperfect faith, and a confirmed faith. First, we're going to see a desperate faith. We see a father in an impossible situation. Jesus comes to Cana, as the text says, and it's where water was turned into wine. And so this was the place of Jesus' first miracle, and it was a very public miracle. And so what's happened here is Jesus is coming to Cana. The people of Cana are remembering this, and they come out to meet him. There is a large crowd, almost parade-like. He's in the region of his hometown. So there's this almost like regional kid returns, and he's this miracle worker. And so they show up, and it's almost like this crowd is kind of humming, and hey, that's the guy who did the thing with the wine. And you can almost feel the energy in the crowd. He's the miracle worker. What else is he going to do? What else can he do for me? And if you picture this crowd, 100 people, 200 people, whatever, in your mind, the narrator zooms into the crowd. And almost like there's this guy kind of snaking his way through the crowd, pushing people aside. You can see he's sweaty and he's eager, but not in the same way the rest are eager. He's pushing his way to the front. He's in nice clothes. You can tell he's rich. He's a man of means. And yet when you look at this man's face, you can see there's a desperation there. It's different than every other face. You can see this man, there's a fear in his eyes, and worry just drips right off of him. Off of every, excuse me, let me through. He's a man on a mission. He's a man that will not be stopped. The text calls him an official. In the Greek, it's the word for king. And so we understand this guy was likely in the court of Herod. So he's up in the northern part of Galilee, and Herod was the puppet king of Rome. And so this guy, if he's Jewish, is not very well liked because he's part of the puppet kingdom of Rome. If he's Gentile, he's not liked because he's Gentile. And so this guy is snaking his way through this big crowd, and he's from about, in Galilee, or Capernaum and Galilee are about 20 miles away. Capernaum is at sea level. Capernaum and Cana. Capernaum is at sea level. Cana is about 20 miles up into the mountains of Israel. And so this guy has traveled 20 miles to see Jesus. He's heard of Jesus, and we just take that to mean word of Jesus' miraculous abilities have spread even as far as into Capernaum and Galilee. And this man was in need of a miracle in the worst way. And how do we know that? Because the worst thing any mother or father could hear would, when the doctor comes into the room and says, "I'm sorry, there's nothing more we can do. Your child is going to die." That's this father. And in that moment, we don't quite have the interchange there, but in this moment, something sparks. And he remembers that there's a guy who turned water into wine. And he goes, well, if he can do that, I wonder if he can do something for my son. I wonder if there's, we don't know what happened to his son. We don't know if it's an infection or fever. It doesn't matter. The boy's going to die. And for some reason, in that moment, with all of his official powers and all of his money and all of everything, he can't do anything. All of the worldly trust that he has in his abilities, it's all nothing. He is completely laid waste. And he remembers that this guy named Jesus, and he does this thing that you don't expect, because he's an official. He doesn't send a servant to go get Jesus and bring him. He goes himself. He says, I got to go see this guy. If he's for real, maybe there's a chance I could get one more week with my son. Maybe there's a chance if I could just cajole him to come down. Maybe he can kind of heal him. This isn't a deep belief. It is a Hail Mary of hope. It is a last-ditch effort of a desperate man. It's not full-fledged faith. It's not settled faith. It's not imperfect faith. It is fatherly desperation wrapped up in a story about a guy from Jerusalem in a 20-mile sprint. That's all this is. It's what you and I would do if we had no other hope of trying to save our son or daughter. We would sprint anywhere, go anywhere, climb anything, do anything. What's interesting too is desperation's like that for us. It's often like the seedbed of faith. You know, at these moments in our life that bring us to the end of ourselves, where we have to recognize, oh, I'm not in control. Oh, I can't do the thing that I care most about. It's when the diagnosis comes in and medicine doesn't have the answer. It's when your son or daughters run from the faith and won't return their phone calls. It's when you're single and the loneliness is crippling. It's when your marriage is a mixture of resentment, anger, and avoidance, and you kind of wish you were single, right? It's when the rent goes up 20% and you don't have it. I guess what I'm saying is this man's son ends up being a catalyst for saving faith. That God uses this hopeless situation to create a scenario where this man with all the power, with all the authority, with all the means, is ruined of all that and stripped of all that and has no power, has no real means, can't do what he needs to be done, and sends him sprinting into the arms of Jesus. This is how sorrow often works. God often uses hardship in our lives to do the same thing, to strip us down of the trappings of control and power and influence that we think we have. I mean, all of us are one text message away, one phone call away of having all of the pretense of our influence stripped away from us. Charles Spurgeon, a world-renowned preacher in his time, a large church, mega success, big influence, struggled with depression mightily, struggled with physical maladies and gout. And he used to say this about his time in suffering. And he said, I've learned to kiss the waves that throw me against the rock of ages. he seemed to understand what God was doing, that it was better to be in pain and be disabused of his actual authority and power than to be in a situation where his power, his idols, and all of that were the thing that he trusted in. Trials and hardship often reveal what we really place our trust in. And once those limits are reached, we find ourselves like this man, running anywhere, doing anything to find the answer. And so the official runs. He goes to the feet of Jesus and begins to beg. And Jesus' answer is not what we expect. We see a tested faith. The second type of faith is a tested faith. When you think of Jesus, all of us have a picture of who Jesus is and how he should act. We all kind of co-opt Jesus. Problem is when you read the Gospels, Jesus acts in some really unexpected, unpredictable, and almost like really abrasive ways. We kind of encounter this because if we were to encounter or in our minds think about how Jesus would respond, here's this desperate man who's come up 20 miles a hill to see him, and he's thrown him at his feet. We would say, man, Jesus is going to hug him, and out of compassion, he's going to grab him and go right home, and he's going to heal him. But that's not what happens. Look at verse 48. So the man comes to him, puts himself below him, and Jesus says to him, after the man begs for his son's life, and looks at him and says, unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. What a bummer. It's so unpredictable. And here's the thing, like, Jesus always responds to the deepest need the person has, even if they're not able to articulate it. Because that's all he cares about. He's using the sick son to reveal what the Father actually believes. In verse 48, Jesus says the word you twice. And I want to stop here because it's important. It's in the Greek plural. And so it's really, unless y'all see signs and wonders, y'all will not believe. And so this official's with the crowd. And Jesus is no longer just talking to just the official. He's talking to the whole crowd. That there is a testing Jesus is offering to the crowd and to the Father. I want to address both these. So he's testing to expose the crowd. This crowd has come there just to watch Jesus, to admire Jesus, maybe to get something from him. They've come in the opposite spirit of the people of Samaria. The people of Samaria required no signs. They required no miracles. They believed and took him at his word. Here is these people in Cana who said, man, this is the water into wine guy. Who knows what he's going to do? And you know what? And who knows? I might be able to get near him. I'm able to get a miracle from him. Or I might be counted among his disciples or whatever it is. And look, this is a common problem for all of us. More of us spend time in the crowd than we'd like to admit. Where we say, look, prove it, and then I'll believe it. We say, prove it, and I'll have faith. Or more, just more honestly, we go, change my circumstances, and then I'll trust you. God, heal my brother, and then I'll trust you love me. Get me that promotion, God, and I'll trust that you'll provide for me. Or find me a spouse, and I'll worship you. Grant us a child, and I'll tell others about you. Take care of my retirement, and I'll believe. And look, none of these are bad, but that's not the point. Jesus is rebuking a conditional faith. Where we come to him and say, I will have faith in you if you remove the need to have faith. I'll have faith in you if you give me all of the solutions to all my problems right now so my life is comfortable enough so I don't actually have to trust you. This is the problem of the crowd. And what's worse is that this crowd is really a form of what we would call the prosperity gospel, where we say to Jesus, if you do this for me, make my life comfortable, heal, give me money, whatever it is, I'll trust you. If I get what I want, exactly how I want, then you're good. If you provide for me exactly in the way that I tell you should provide for me, then you're good. And when we don't get what we want, he's not good or doesn't love us or isn't trustworthy. In this framework, Jesus is only worth following if he delivers on what we demand. This is the problem of the crowd. Seeing isn't about believing. Seeing is about demanding. That's not faith. That's manipulation. That's not faith. That's conditional following. That's not honoring to Jesus. It's only honoring Jesus for what he can do for you. And he wants to make sure the crowd who's watching understands what's happening. And so he talks to the man the same way. He's testing the man to strengthen his own faith. And it's interesting because he's in the middle of this crowd. The crowd didn't have to go anywhere. They just kind of showed up. The man had to come to Cana. He had to sprint up to Cana. He had to go 20 miles. He had to be part of this massive gathering. There was at least something, some sort of reasonable intellectual hope that we wouldn't call like saving faith. We would just say, he heard about this guy who was powerful, and that drove him up the hill. That drove him up 20 miles of hills. He heard about the testimony, and he had to at least agree mentally that it was possible that Jesus could do it for him, and so he runs up the hill. The crowd was there to witness power, to take advantage of power. The man was there to plead with the power. The crowd was there to witness the miracle worker. The man was there to humble himself at the miracle worker's feet. The crowd was there to cheer. The man was there to beg. These words seem harsh to the man. But faith requires trusting Jesus first. That he is who he says he is, that he is the Son of God and he is the Lord of life. Faith requires trusting Jesus at his word, that we are who he says we are, that we are sinful, helpless, and in need of mercy. And that trusting him when he says eternity is at stake, that there are eternal realities of heaven and hell that are not metaphorical, but are true destinations for the damned and the saved, that we take him at his word, that Jesus requires something from us other than just amazement at how good he is or how great his miracles are. He demands our whole life and trust in every inch of our life. Jesus is asking this man, are you willing to do what the crowd will not do? Are you willing to trust me without seeing the results? Are you willing to follow me without the guarantee of deliverance? The crowd was trusting in what Jesus might do. The official is being challenged to trust in who Jesus is. And the official's response shows that he's up for the challenge. We saw a desperate faith, a tested faith, and now an imperfect faith. Verse 49, follow along. The official said to him, "Sir, come before my child dies." And Jesus said, "Go, your son will live." And the man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and went on his way. A few just notes on the translation. The man says "sir," which is kurie in the Greek, which means Lord or master. And I only say that because here is this official who really is a Lord or a master. And he's looking at Jesus, and he's no longer the official. He's just a desperate father. He looks up at Jesus, "Lord, Master, can you help me?" He says, "Come down." And this is not at all an unusual request, because the way healings happened in the past with prophets is prophets had to be right next to the person they were healing, to place hands on them, to put mud on them, whatever it was. That there was no framework for what Jesus says here. The right framework was, hey, if you could just come and be near my son and you could just touch him or breathe on him or whatever it is, he will be saved. And he assumes that Jesus has the power, and he assumes that the only way his son can be saved is if Jesus shows up. And Jesus says, "I'm not going with you." He gives him a command. He says, "Go. Your son will live." The man is being forced into a public decision. Can I trust his word that he is who he says he is? That this is done? Because it's a long walk home. It's 20 miles downhill. Can I trust him without knowing? Jesus isn't going to walk with him. He's not going to give him the certainty of going with him. Jesus wants the official to choose to trust him just because of who he is and not what he can produce. There's no guarantee here. In order for the man to trust the words of Jesus, he must trust Jesus himself. And so I just ask this question: how much faith in Jesus does the Father need to have here? How much? Like, in order to follow Jesus here, does he have to remove all questions? Does he have to have no doubts? I mean, look, that's a long way home. That's 20 miles. He's walking the whole time. Like, what's required? What is Jesus requiring of this man? That he goes with perfect obedience and perfect faith and doesn't ask any questions and doesn't have any doubts and doesn't have any worries? No. Well, another question is, how much faith in Jesus do we need to have to follow him? Like, how much is the Lord expecting of us? Do you have to be a Christian for years before you can really be a person of faith? Do you have to have the robust theological education? Do you need to know all about Greek or Hebrew? Do you need to be able to share your faith? Like what really is required of us to follow Jesus? What the man does here is instructive for us, for what the Lord requires from us in faith. It's instructive. What does he do? He just starts walking. You and I, if we're at the feet of Jesus and we say, listen, we need you to come, I need you to come with me. And he says, go, your son will live. We go, the crowd's loud. You didn't hear me. I said, I need you to come with me. I need you to be right next to me. We're going to beg and negotiate and make sure he heard us. We're not going to walk right away. He doesn't try to order Jesus to come. He doesn't repeat it as if Jesus didn't hear. He takes Jesus at his word before seeing evidence. He believes before he sees. And here's what's interesting. What follows his belief is obedience. That he believes and then takes the first step out of the crowd. Then the next step out of Cana, then the next step down the first mile, then the second mile, then the third mile, and just keeps walking. So what is really the question? How much faith in Jesus does the Father need to have? The answer is this: just enough to do what Jesus said. We just think there's this massive weight of what it takes to follow the Lord. And this guy's a great example. Jesus said, go, and what did he do? He started walking. Just took the next step. It wasn't perfect faith. It wasn't mature faith. It was a sprout of faith. A sapling of faith, fragile, young, green faith. It's as if the man's saying, I believe you can do this, and so I'm going to start walking home and find out. It didn't mean he doesn't have doubts. Didn't mean he didn't have questions. It didn't mean he wasn't skeptical. He had just enough faith to take the first step, then the next step, then the next. That's all that was required. He took Jesus at his word, and he started walking. This man's faith displays an important truth about the Christian life. Genuine faith is always followed by action. Always followed by movement. Real faith always moves the feet. We look at this story and you kind of imagine the official walking down 20 miles, and we think it was his feet that walked him there. It was his faith that moved him down that mountain. At any point, if he stops believing that Jesus has healed his son, he's not walking anymore. If he doesn't believe what Jesus says, in that moment, he's not walking. We think obedience creates faith, but it's quite the opposite. Faith always precedes obedience. That trust in the Lord and who he is and what he says and his commands, all of that has to start here. If it's true here, then it works its way out in our life. And if we say Jesus is Lord, then it is an absolute guarantee that at some point, following him will force us to walk by faith. Because at some point he's going to say, listen, I know you don't have the money. I know you don't think I'm going to provide, but you need to go and I'll provide for you. At some point he's going to say, listen, I know it's a wreck. I know it's not what you planned, but you go be faithful. Trust me with your marriage. He's going to say, listen, I know you're lonely. I know you feel abandoned, but I need you to go. I've not forgotten about you. Lived rightly, the Christian life is having just enough faith for the next step. Not the fifth step, not the outcome, but just the next step. And if each step we carry our doubts, we carry our fears, we carry our questions and hopes. And so the official starts walking out of Cana, imperfect, small, fragile faith, about to be confirmed on the way home. We have the final aspect of faith is a confirmed faith. Verses 51 through 54. I want to just note, and I want to read it, follow along, and I want you to just note the time. There's some time passing here that's really important as you kind of see the narrator, as John is writing this, wants us to note some time things. Verse 51, as he was going down, a progress in time, his servants met him and told him that his son was recovering. And he asked them the hour when he began to get better. And they said to him, yesterday at the 7th hour, the fever left him. The father knew that that was the hour when Jesus had said to him, your son will live. And he told himself, and he said, and he himself believed, and all his household. This was now the second sign that Jesus did when he had come from Judah to Galilee. Verse 51, he's on the trip down, on the way down. Verse 52, at some point as he's heading down, his servants come up to give him good news. And they say, your son is recovering and he's doing well. And the father asks, when did this happen? Which is a really great question because he's traveling on belief at this point, right? He wants to know, is this guy the Messiah? Yeah, is it possible? And they say, yeah, at the 7th hour yesterday, which is interesting because it calls into question a little bit of the father's disposition because it's 20 miles away, right? And if it's yesterday, and the 7th hour is 1 o'clock in the day. So Jesus, the man goes, sees Jesus. They have this conversation. At 1 o'clock, Jesus says, go, your son will live. He begins to go home and travels, presumably, far enough into the night, or maybe he stops somewhere, that his servants don't reach him until the next day. And I observe that as a dad, I likely would not walk down the hill. I'd get a horse, I'd rob a chariot, I don't know, but I would not delay. All indications show that he didn't sprint home, that the pace of his walking matched his faith, that he wasn't walking down the hill in anxious worry. He wasn't walking down the hill wondering whether or not. He was waiting to get confirmation. And so the servants, and really the only ones who we think run in this narrative are the servants because they're bringing the good news and want to find this guy. And they run up and say, your son's been whatever, your son's been healed. And when did this happen? Yesterday at 1 o'clock. And the guy goes, that's crazy because it's just 1 o'clock. This guy said from 20 miles away, your son will live. And who else could do that but God? And all of this just begins to show the narrative, one, of this guy's small faith and the power of God. It shows that Jesus was God. Who else could heal from 20 miles away? And if we think about it even more, just for a second, Jesus said, go, your son will live. He spoke and it happened. That's the creation narrative. That's Genesis 1. That only the Messiah could do, that only the creator of the universe could say from 20 miles away, go, your son will live. And so Jesus, his command is go, your son will live. And in response, he goes, and in response, his son lives. Both listen to the command. So here he is, maybe halfway down, 2/3 down. We don't know how far. But John says, verse 53, and he himself believed. The first time we see John say belief, it's the belief that motivates him away from Jesus down the 20 miles to Capernaum. And now, he himself, John, it's emphatic in the Greek. It's he himself, that there's something different that's happened to him. That what was this hopeful faith to move him had become a personal, convinced, convicted, full faith. Not secondhand faith. Not my wife believes, so I believe, or my husband believes, so I believe, or I grew up in a Christian family, so I'm a Christian, or I go to church, so I believe. It's I believed then, I believe even more now, and I want everyone to know. He believes in who Jesus is. He believes who Jesus says he is. He believes in what Jesus teaches. His faith became conviction, and his experience became his witness. That's the whole spectrum here, is he goes from this desperate father who just had an inkling of hope in his mind to a man who came home and saw his son healed and preached the gospel to his whole family, and they became Christian. So just one question for us today. One question. Are you living off counterfeit faith, watching Jesus from the crowd? It is important for us to understand that the crowd that gathered did not have faith in Jesus, even though from an onlooker, it looked like they did. They were happy with him. They were fine with him. He was a miracle worker. But they wanted what he could produce. They did not want him. Is there a part of your life where you're waiting to see God move before you trust him? Maybe it's your marriage and you're waiting for God to change your spouse before you'll trust him. Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's your family. I don't know. And I just want to say this, if there's a part of your life like mine, where you are asking the Lord and say, if you'll do this, I'll trust you. That is sign-seeking faith, and it isn't faith. And it does not honor the Lord, and it does not produce in you what you hope it would. Jesus does not negotiate. He does not equivocate. He demands your trust, and he demands your faith. Not in what he can do, but in who he is as the Messiah and Savior of the world. Paul in Corinthians says this, for we walk by faith and not by sight. And look, I can hear the objections, because I have them too. Pastor Mark, that's really cool. But his son got healed. Of course he's going to believe. 100%. And you go, if that happened to me, I'd believe. Sign-seeking generation. That's what that is. That's what it is. John at the end, near the end of his gospel, says, blessed are the ones who come after. This is Jesus. Blessed are the ones who come after and believe without seeing. Blessed are the ones born 2,000 years beyond me. Blessed are the ones who won't see me do the miracle, who won't see me on the cross. Blessed are they who believe without seeing. And I would just say this. You're not being asked to run by faith. Not being asked to sprint by faith or jog by faith. Walk. Walk, just the next step. Moment by moment, minute by minute, one step at a time, one day at a time. Jesus is asking you to walk with him by faith in who he is, trusting what you cannot see to his power and providence. Not focused on outcome, what God might do, but on who he is regardless of what happens. The father in this story had to walk 20 miles because Jesus said one sentence. Where might Jesus be asking you to start walking without seeing in your own life? Where is Jesus asking you to trust him with the things that are most precious to you? Jerusalem is 6,600 miles from Missoula by air. 2,000 years ago, 6,600 miles away, Jesus hung on the cross and said these words, "It is finished." You and I were not there to hear it. We were not there 3 days after in the garden at the empty tomb. We were not there to witness what the angels had to say to the women. But that word has reached you here 66,000 miles away and 2,000 years later. And that word asks you, will you trust that it is finished? That he is who he says he is. And look, if you're desperate, so is the official. You're in good company. And all of us will be desperate at some point in our lives. If you're in crisis mode, so was he. And Jesus is inviting you to believe and then see. What's interesting about these words, it is finished. It's the same declaration. It has a couple different implications, well, many, but I just want to draw out two. One, it means that the work of our salvation is finished, that all of our forgiveness, all of our sins, past, present, and future, are paid for, that when he finished it, it means there's nothing more you can do to merit God's love, nothing more you can do to merit his approval or his pleasure or any of that, that Jesus paid it all so that you don't have to work for and you can't keep any of God's love that is given into you by Jesus on the cross, that it is finished, that you can rest in the finished work of Christ. And then for us in faith, it means that when he says it is finished, every word that he uttered in promise, in hope, in everything will come true. When he said, I'll never leave you or forsake you, or that he sees you and cares for you and provides for you, or that he loves you and will never stop loving you. When he said it is finished, it put the stamp of all of that, which means we can trust him in every moment, in every aspect, with every part of our life. Why? Because he said it is finished and then walked out of the grave, conquering death, securing salvation, and giving us new life. So we don't have to live wondering whether or not he loves us, wondering whether or not he leaves us. He died and rose again. What can't we trust him with? What can't we trust him with? Will you trust him? Will I trust him? It's an invitation this morning to walk by faith and not by feeling. Our feelings lie so often. To walk by faith and not by feeling. the same Savior who spoke the galaxies into being, said, "It is finished," and invites you to believe him today. Will you? Let's pray. God, we don't want to be the crowd. We want the type of faith that trusts you with the whole of our lives, the things that we love, the things that are precious, the things we couldn't imagine losing. God, we desire to trust you with our whole lives, to believe fully in you without seeing, and trusting that you are who you say you are, and that we are in need of what we are in need of, forgiveness and new life, and that the only way that comes is through your death on the cross and your resurrection that conquered the grave. So God, would you help me to believe today? Would you help your people to believe? Would you move us from the crowd to the followers? Pray this in your name. Amen.